Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, back in Labor Day 2016, so like a year and a half ago, I made this really short, like 2.5, 3 minute video, and it was titled something like "What Makes an RPG Old School or OSR?" Somewhere around those. The title was something like that. And I started thinking about that video recently. Went back and rewatched it, I did that because of these video responses I made to Rob H, where he asked me about my RPG evolution, and what did I think now? And it was interesting and fun making those videos, but I wanted to go back to that because I want to take this from a different angle and not necessarily talk about what makes an RPG old school to me now, but what makes an RPG feel like home. And I've found that that's changed a little bit over time, where I've been able to refine what I mean by that. And if you watch my channel, and who wouldn't, because I'm fascinating, the hubris is unreal. I came into the hobby a long time ago. I played some early versions of TSR D&D. I ended up, getting married, having kids, doing all the life stuff, kind of put games down. Came back into the hobby, found some friends that were playing games, role-playing games. I figured, okay, these guys play role-playing games, and they were playing a game called Pathfinder. I found out that this did not feel like home. Nothing wrong with that game, but it just wasn't for me. It was responsible in many ways for my YouTube channel. And I discovered and retreated to the OSR, thinking I found my people. And in many ways I had found, people with similar interests, but once again I found over time that I wouldn't call it fractious necessarily, although it can be sometimes, but it was not a single coherent community. There were a lot of different biases and preferences there, and different, the games felt different, what people were doing felt different. So I went out and I explored various other role-playing games, and I'm still enjoying doing that now, and seeing, various types of games and various types of experiences. But, I continually kind of do this assessment, what feels like home? When I played this particular game, what felt like home? What felt comfortable? What didn't? And so this video is going to be pretty laced with bias and preference, so your mileage might vary. As I've gone on and played different games, I still, kind of think of it, what are the essential ingredients to an RPG experience that feels the most like home for me? And it's going to vary from person to person, I get that. And I'm not saying that I won't continue to try these various games, because I can learn something from all of them, and I can have fun playing all of them. But I've noticed that, time and again, I gravitate towards a certain type of experience. And so, maybe I'll go a little bit point by point off of what I said 2.5 years ago. It's surprising how much I still agree with. And, I looked at some other videos that other people had made that were kind of instrumental in kind of formulating some of my opinions, or like at least, not necessarily formulating my opinions, but giving me a language to be able to talk in about all these kinds of things. I looked at some other videos I made around that time, including a very bodaciously titled video, something like "All RPGs are really just D&D." Well, sort of. And, I don't agree with everything I said in that video now, but there's still a lot of things that make sense in terms of what I like in an RPG. But anyhow, I'm digressing. Let me jump in here. One of the things I said a long time ago was I found that the specific mechanics were less important than the spirit of the game. This was kind of surprising to me back then, but I found this still to be true today. It doesn't really matter necessarily what the mechanics are. Every mechanic definitely brings with it a different feel. Different systems feel different because of the chance of success, the various things that the results they produce. So there are definitely ones that feel a little bit more like home than others. Things that tend to promote almost sure success all the time feel a little less like home. Ones that produce really, you never succeed, feel a little less like home. I'm somewhere in the middle of that. And maybe I gravitate towards things that are a little bit pulpier in general, but, I still have a spectrum. When it gets really, really far, especially to the end where you succeed all the time, or it seems that way, it becomes super heroic. I'm not against it, but it does feel a little bit less like home. I found that things like, level wasn't all that important. In fact, sometimes it could really detract from the experience that I wanted. As long as there was some way to improve the characters a little bit over time, that feels like home, but I don't necessarily need to have the things that I grew up with. It doesn't have to be class and level. Things like archetype, some numbers that indicate, or that this character is like this, that differentiate one character from another. It doesn't have to be the 6 stats. It doesn't have to be classes. It could be archetypes. It could be simply you build your character and, some way to give me a picture of who this person actually is. I found it really interesting that James Raggi, as he's continuing Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and especially the 2 free RPG Day, the last 2 that he put out that I've reviewed and used the playtest rules in, the idea that he's kind of morphing this really familiar game into something that's different, which, in many ways is something that feels a lot like home to me in terms of not entirely abandoning, level, but pretty darn close, with the idea that characters come in and they're a little bit more competent, that you kind of mush down this spread, this power spread. And, it's not so much a zero to hero thing. There's a smaller spread of, character competence. For me, that feels a lot more like home, a lot more, I hate to use the word realistic, but it doesn't strain credulity. It doesn't, kind of prevent my buy-in or kind of ruin the immersion for me. Because part of the experience I found were something that, like Runeslinger and Same Old G were talking about some years ago, the idea that there's various intentions for play. It could be something very player-first intentions, beer and pretzels, where you're just getting together. It could be very story-first intention, where we are creating a story, and that's really our main focus, is let's make this really cool story. And there's various ways to do that, but the emphasis is on the story itself. And the other 2 intentions, which are more character-first intention, having this experience, as the character, from that viewpoint of the character, and this setting-first intention, where it's more about, exploring the setting itself. And I found that for me, very often, what feels the most like home is having this experience from the viewpoint of the character, kind of stepping into their shoes, making those decisions, and kind of exploring the whole setting too. The genre can be very important to me as well. But having that big level spread, that can sometimes ruin it. I found, son of a gun, it feels more like home to be able to, have this character and have kind of things be a little bit more realistic for the genre itself, which may vary considerably, which are what the mechanics are for. Anyhow, let's see what else. I still find, even like, I said years ago, I tend to gravitate a system that has fast resolution. Like I just talked about that domain that Anthony kind of said about the rules light versus rules heavy, or light versus heavy, not rules light versus rules heavy, but the number of operations you actually need to produce a result. I tend to like a smaller number of operations. I tend to like games where that can be a little bit more abstract, where there's a little bit more wiggle room to make up, well, what does this actually mean? Where we don't actually, have various results and they all kind of tell you very specifically what things mean. There's a little bit more room for creativity. I'm not saying the other ones are bad, I don't enjoy them, just that I tend to gravitate towards this somewhat, semi-abstract. That tends to float my boat and feel the most like home, where we can there's the room for that creativity. It's funny, speaking of creativity, I mentioned 2.5 years ago that things like emphasis on player creativity and player skill were really important, or that made a game feel OSR or old school. I find now for what makes a game feel Ivan school, if you will, that's less important. It's not necessarily a litmus test for like, can you play with me? And it doesn't that the games can have other ingredients in terms of like just like skills that will help out with that. That it's not all about are you the cleverest player at the table. That's less important and feels less like home to me. That's not one of those things that's really, really necessary. I talked years ago about the idea that rulings over rules, and I would say that a little bit differently these days. I would say more like a game that allows for that to happen, that has maybe some fruitful void, where we are able to look at how does the system work, what's the intention of the system, what's the genre we're trying to emulate, what would make the most sense here based upon this genre, what would happen here right now, how can we use the mechanics to do this, allowing the game master to do that. Likewise, I talked about like a game that was robust enough to be house ruled. That's less of a litmus test for me today. But the idea that if it becomes necessary, that we allow a game master to make a ruling or say, hey, there's really nothing here. Just roll a die 50-50, something like that. Sort of house ruling it in that moment. Or in a group where we find, and I'm talking more about my play experience, so we find something's just not working for us, that we're okay with experimentation if it's required. You know, if for some reason we really like this game except for this one little bit, and you know we're all on board for trying something else. It's not necessarily a litmus test, or you know, that's an essential ingredient of you know, my play experience. And I noticed as I was looking at a lot of what still feels like home to me, the word trust kept coming up. The idea that, you know, playing with a group of people where we are going to trust each other to not be unfair, where we're not worried that the game master is going to be, you know, was going to screw us over, or is going to do something unfair, where, you know, they are going to act as an impartial referee, and you know, that we trust them to simply have what's best for the fiction, or what's best, you know, to make a fair ruling. The game's silent here. Okay, we need somebody to say it's time to end the scene, or you know, time passes, or gosh, there's really no resolution here. Okay, come up with something, and that we trust them to do that from a standpoint of necessity. Rather than trying to get one over on us. And you know, I've said it before, and it's still true for me now, that you know, I don't want to rely upon rules and procedures to protect me from the other players and from the game master. And this applies, you know, whether I'm the game master or somebody else is the game master. If I'm just, you know, if I'm another player, that's not the experience I'm looking for. That doesn't feel like home. What feels like home and feels the most comfortable and the most enjoyable role-playing game experience for me is, you know, playing with the right people, you know, playing where we do trust each other, and you know, sometimes even if it's not really transparent, and I know this may make some people very uncomfortable. It's okay. Where I'm talking about my preferences, where you know, I've you know, even in some of the games I'm playing right now, I don't understand how everything works, and when the game master says, "Here, we're going to roll this," and now you've lost this much tenacity, and I don't really understand how it's all working. You know, I trust them not to screw me over, and in fact, I really enjoy it because I wonder what's going to happen. You know, and that's just me. That's a big part of what makes a role-playing game experience feel like home, is that level of trust and playing with the right people, if you will. A game still, you know, I said a long time ago, a game that allows the, you know, the dice to determine the outcomes still feels a lot like home to me. You know, despite the fact that sometimes you might, oh man, I wish that hadn't happened, but just allowing those plastic gods to speak, and this is what happened. That feels very, very, you know, it seems very important to me. It doesn't necessarily mean that they always have to be in the open. I understand that's very important for some people, but sometimes I don't care if sometimes a game master makes a secret roll because my character manifestly would not know something. It doesn't matter to me. But the idea that I trust them to not fudge that die is important because, once again, you know, I'm playing with the right people. I said something interesting, you know, back then. You know, I said a litmus test for what would make a game feel old school was a game that I can, you know, any game that I can teach to somebody in an hour, especially when they're playing it, is old school. And you know, a game that can be mastered by studying the rules isn't. But you know, more talking these days about, you know, what feels the most like home. That's a little less important. I still tend to prefer and like a smaller library, a smaller book, something that I can learn a little easier, that I can teach to somebody a little bit easier. That's not overly complex. It doesn't have a lot. It doesn't mean I don't enjoy, and I don't you know, I'm not willing to reap the benefits of learning a bigger system by doing that. It just to me still something that's a little bit on the smaller side, a little bit more manageable, something that I can really kind of, you know, wrap my head around. And maybe I'll make another video talking about what, you know, some of the reasons why that is. That feels a little bit more like home, a little bit more comfortable to me. And so, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter what the mechanics are. It doesn't matter, you know, how the game chooses to represent the characters. It doesn't necessarily matter what the genre is. It doesn't matter, you know, a whole bunch of things don't really matter anymore to me in terms of what feels like home. I like an experience, you know, stepping in the shoes of a character. I like, you know, a game table where we trust each other. I like, you know, some mechanics that are easy to wrap our heads around, where the resolution is relatively swift, where there is this level of abstraction, where this allows us some room to, you know, I wonder what that meant. You know, allow the game master, allow the other players, allow me to narrate what this actually means. Where there are some defined loci, everybody has their locus of control. I enjoy that quite a bit. Where the game master kind of acts as this conduit for the players to experience the world through their characters. He becomes their senses. He becomes the referee of reality. That tends to feel very much at home to me. Where we as players aren't necessarily making up game world reality, but simply acting, as if we were the characters. For the most part, that feels more like home to me. I'm not saying that's wrong. There's nothing wrong with games that do that. I still enjoy playing those other games where we kind of co-create reality. But still, what feels the most like home is where I have a defined locus of control. And that's my character, and where the game master is able to represent the world. They're my conduit to, geez, what do I see? What happens? All that sort of thing. So I'm still enjoying my experimentation with other games, but I found that at the end of the day, certain things feel like home. Doesn't mean they have to be OSR or old school. And in fact, I'm finding that I'm not really sure exactly how to categorize the games that all feel like home. It seems to be a large number of them. They can be very different. I find All for One Regime Diabolique feels completely like home. I'm finding that Delta Green feels an awful lot like home. I'm interested to see how some other games feel. I found that a small part of Uncharted Worlds we played, it really felt an awful lot like home. So, anyhow, hope you enjoyed this video, or at least you got a better look into my psyche. But I'd be interested to hear from you. Like, what are the essential ingredients of an RPG experience for you that feel like home? Do you have a hard time nailing it down to one game? Is it harder to talk about than you thought about? I'd be interested to hear about that.